Curiosity began it. Quiet, glimmering, impossible to ignore, curling through the snowy air the moment Elara May Whitlock realized the wagon wasn't taking her toward forgiveness but toward a man she had never met. She sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale against the fraying wool of her dress, while the world around her blurred into drifting white. Her father didn't look at her. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, jaw clenched as though the shape of her presence offended him. Elara watched the steam rise from the horse's nostrils and wondered if they, too, sensed how the day was shifting her fate. At 22, she had learned not to expect softness. Not from family, not from neighbors, not from the world that had stamped her with a quiet shame of infertility, a word whispered behind doors, used like a verdict. She had spent years becoming small, believing that shrinking would lessen the sting of rejection. But nothing had prepared her for being sold. Even now, her mind struggled to accept it, as if truth might slip backward and rewrite itself if she stayed silent enough. Ahead, a figure emerged from the snowfall, a tall man in a dark coat, shoulders dusted white, face half hidden by a thick beard that made him look carved from the very mountains behind him. Soren Callahan, 34. Reclusive. Rumored wealthy. Rumored strange. Rumored kind in a way people didn't trust because gentleness that quiet often frightened those who had never known it. Elara's breath caught in her throat when his gaze found her. Not assessing. Not greedy. Just observant, as though he were trying to understand how she'd come to be standing there in the cold, trembling in a threadbare dress. Something softened in his expression, a fleeting shift, so gentle she almost thought she imagined it. Her father dismounted, grabbed her by the elbow, and urged her forward. His grip held no affection, only finality. The exchange was quick, a small pouch of coins, its weight shamefully light, passed from Soren's gloved hand to her father's. For a moment, nobody spoke. The snow fell thicker, muting the world into a hush that felt painfully intimate. Elara lowered her eyes, waiting for the tone she'd grown used to, commanding, irritated, impatient. Instead, she heard a voice low and steady. "Miss Whitlock," Soren murmured, the respectful address startling her more than any raised voice could have. "The trail's cold today. You should ride where the wind won't cut you." She looked up despite herself. His eyes were warm, not in color, but in the quiet patience behind them. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. The journey toward his mountain cabin unfolded like a slow-moving memory, thick with silence yet strangely free of dread. The horse's hooves sank into fresh snow, each step sounding like a heartbeat muffled beneath blankets. Elara kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers twitching whenever Soren shifted beside her. He kept a respectful distance, though the cramped space on the wagon seat forced them closer than her nerves preferred. The wind rose, sharp as needles, tugging at her thin sleeves. Instinctively she braced herself, preparing to endure. But Soren noticed before she could hide the shiver. Without a word, he shrugged off his heavy fur-lined coat and draped it around her shoulders with a careful, measured motion, as if he feared startling her. The warmth of it seeped into her bones, unfamiliar and disarming. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. "You're welcome," he replied softly, eyes fixed on the road, giving her space to gather herself. The landscape changed as they climbed higher, town noises fading, replaced by the creak of trees bending under snow and the distant cry of winter birds. Elara watched the world through a lens of hesitant wonder, realizing how little she had seen beyond her hometown. Yet with wonder came uncertainty. She didn't know why Soren had agreed to take her in. Did he need labor? Company? Silence? Whatever the reason, she braced for the moment kindness would vanish. It always did. Soren guided the wagon around a bend, revealing a cabin tucked between towering pines. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, carrying the scent of burning cedar. The sight of it stirred something in Elara, a strange mixture of caution and longing. Shelter was a foreign comfort. He hopped down first, brushing snow from his gloves. When he offered her a hand, she froze for a moment, old instincts flaring. Don't be a burden. Don't invite anger. Don't misstep. But his hand didn't press or insist. It simply waited. She placed her trembling fingers into his palm, and he supported her lightly, guiding her to the ground as though she were made of frost that might melt beneath too much touch. Inside, The cabin glowed with warmth from a fire crackling in the hearth. Soren stepped aside, letting her enter first. The space was simple but cared for. Wooden tables sanded smooth, shelves lined with neatly stacked provisions, blankets folded with quiet discipline. She noticed only one bed, and her pulse quickened. But Soren, sensing her tension, spoke gently. "You'll take the room," he said. "I sleep in the loft. It's warmer up there anyway." He said it as though it were obvious, the only reasonable arrangement. Ilara blinked, unsure how to respond. She had expected assumptions, expectations. Instead, she felt considered. He prepared a meal, stew simmering with herbs she didn't recognize, its aroma soothing her in ways she didn't trust yet. He set the bowl in front of her, then stepped back, giving her space once again. His restraint made her chest ache with a confusion she couldn't name. Between spoonfuls, her gaze drifted to him. He moved quietly, almost carefully, as though he'd grown accustomed to living alongside silence. Yet there was strength in the way he carried himself, measured, unwavering, like someone who had survived storms harsher than winter. As the fire softened the shadows around them, Ilara felt the day settling heavily but not painfully. She was not home, nor fully safe, nor entirely hopeful. But she was not afraid in the way she expected to be. What startled her most wasn't the strangeness of the cabin or the weight of her future. It was the growing curiosity about the man who had treated her with more gentleness in one afternoon than she had known in years. When she met his eyes across the firelight, Soren offered a small nod, no pressure behind it, just acknowledgement, a quiet promise that nothing would be demanded of her tonight. And that small, unspoken mercy left her wondering, for the first time in a long while, what tomorrow might hold. Curiosity lingered in the air the next morning, threading itself into the quiet rhythms of the cabin as Ilara May Whitlock awoke to the scent of cedar smoke and simmering oats. She lay still for a moment, listening to the gentle scrape of a spoon against a pot and the muted crunch of snow being shaken from boots near the door. Something inside her softened at the realization that Soren Callahan had let her sleep without disturbance. No commands. No pressure. Only patience that felt foreign yet deeply welcome. When she stepped into the main room, he looked up with a reserved smile, offering her a steaming bowl without stepping too close. The respect in that small gesture eased her tension, though a flicker of unease accompanied it. Kindness always came with an expiration, didn't it? Soren spoke with deliberate calm, asking if she'd slept well, asking if the room was warm enough, asking nothing she couldn't give. His voice carried a subtle warmth, like sunlight filtered through frost. Ilara answered quietly, and each time she did, she watched something gentle unfold across his features. Approval, perhaps, or relief that she felt safe enough to reply. She noticed the soft lines at the corners of his eyes, carved by years of solitude rather than bitterness. Yet the more she observed him, the more she sensed the unspoken distance he kept, a distance born not of disinterest but of careful restraint, as if he feared startling her into flight. Throughout the day, he introduced her slowly to the life he lived on the mountain. He showed her where the water barrels were kept, how the fire was fed, how the woodpile needed splitting before evening. He didn't ask her to do any of it. He simply showed her the rhythms of his world, allowing her to step into them at her own pace. Ilara watched his hands, broad, capable, steady, as he worked, and something unexplainable stirred within her. A memory surfaced, unbidden, hands that grabbed, pushed, imposed. Hands she'd learned to flinch from. But Soren's hands were different, moving with a patience that invited trust rather than demanded obedience. When she tried to help carry a bucket of water inside, the icy ground betrayed her. Her foot slipped, and the cold bit into her palms as she caught herself. Instantly Soren was beside her, but not with alarm or rebuke. He knelt, offering the lightest support, brushing snow from her sleeve with a tenderness that stole her breath. "Easy," he murmured, voice low, unhurried. "You're all right." His touch lasted only a heartbeat, yet it pierced through layers of old fear, binding something torn inside her back together. She didn't pull away. She didn't want to. As evening approached, the world outside deepened into indigo. Ilara found herself watching Soren as he lit the lanterns, the warm glow softening the rugged lines of his face. She wondered what solitude had carved into him. She wondered if he'd chosen isolation or if isolation had chosen him. The quiet between them didn't feel heavy. It felt like a space waiting to be filled with understanding. But uncertainty still lingered inside her. Why had he taken her in? What did he hope for? What did he fear? Those questions hung between them until a knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. Soren stiffened, shoulders tightening in a way that made Alara's pulse quicken. When he opened the door, Marshal Jed Rourke stepped inside, dusted with snow, eyes sharp with concern. He greeted Soren curtly before turning his attention to Alara. "Miss Whitlock," he said, tone careful, "I came to check on your well-being." Town's talking. The implication hovered in the air like smoke. Alara felt the familiar sting of judgment prickling beneath her skin, memories of whispers and accusations rising like ghosts. Before she could speak, Soren positioned himself subtly between her and the marshal, not aggressively, but protectively. "She's safe here," he said, his voice carrying a firmness she hadn't heard from him before. Yet something inside her urged her not to hide behind him. With trembling resolve, she stepped forward, meeting Jed's gaze. "I'm here by choice," she said softly. "And I'm all right." The marshal studied her, searching for fear or coercion. Finding none, he nodded slowly and took his leave with a final, pointed look at Soren, as though urging him to guard whatever fragile bond had begun forming in the quiet of that cabin. After the door closed, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it pulsed with unspoken truths. Alara could feel something building inside her, a need to unburden herself, to surrender the weight she'd carried for years. She found Soren by the fire, staring into the flames as though the world inside them made more sense than the one outside. Gathering courage she didn't know she possessed, she spoke. She told him about the years of being treated as less than whole. The cruel remarks. The dismissal. The moment her father decided her worth could be measured in silver coins. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She expected pity, or discomfort, or that same flicker of disappointment she'd seen on so many faces before. Instead, she saw something break softly inside Soren, something protective, something tender. He turned toward her and slowly lowered himself to one knee, not in supplication but in reverence, as if honoring the strength it took for her to bear her scars. "Alara," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I didn't bring you here to fill a void or carry a burden. I brought you because I saw someone who deserved care, not cruelty." He hesitated, searching her face as though giving her the chance to step back, but she didn't. "You are not here because you were bought," he continued. "You're here because you deserve a life untouched by those who failed to cherish you." The words washed over her like warm rain in winter. She felt something inside her finally loosen, the tight knot of fear unraveling softly. Without thinking, she placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. He covered her hand with his own, and in that shared warmth, the cabin seemed to glow brighter. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise bound by expectation. It was an understanding, quiet, profound, unforced. That night, the snow outside fell slower, as if granting them peace. Two souls bruised by different storms found steadiness in each other's presence. Alara didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt it opening before her like a path lit by lantern light. Soren met her gaze with a softness that felt like safety, and she realized their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning, blooming with the promise of the happiest ending neither had ever dared dream.